Today's guest is Jack Mangan, founder of S.L.A.M, Support Life in Music. Jack's on a mission to bring awareness, connection, and support to the musicians and fans who make this scene thrive. We'll get into what S.L.A.M is all about and how it's helping the metal community, and hear some stories about the artists who've joined the cause. So, Jack, how are you today?
Doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me on. You guys do an incredible show. I'm going to try to be better than Kirk Hammett or Ian Hill as a guest. I'll try.
Well, you got to be able to do this with the bass guitar if you're Ian Hill, if you want to be
Okay.
better than Ian.
I do
Well,
have
thank
my
you
my
so much.
Jackson here. Yeah, all right, cool. Thank
There's your
you.
Lemmy statue in the background, of course. So,
Yes.
Jack, let's go back to the beginning. What exactly is S.L.A.M, and what inspired you to create it?
Sure, yeah. Support Life in Music Slam. It was just created because musicians are, it's kind of a thing that people don't really appreciate how hard the music life is. There's such a misnomer and so many bad mythologies and romanticisms about the music life. People just believe that musicians are all in mansions and riding around in limousines and filthy rich and you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I wish I had their problems." But there's clearly, if you look at the numbers and if you look at the history, and I don't want to be ghoulish and use people's tragedies to promote slam, but you look, everybody can think immediately of at least three people that they were heartbroken to lose, three musicians they were heartbroken to lose. You got the Chris Cornell's, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Elliott Smith outside of metal. You've got so many, and it's just. So slams exist to really help musicians to provide, like you said in the intro, to raise awareness so that people are aware, and to kind of provide the resources that are needed. The mental health community is not as equipped as they should be to help musicians to kind of cope with all these things that people romanticize, but which actually are kind of screwed up and harmful in the music world. It's across all genres. So yeah, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Was there a specific event in, let's say, your personal experience for you that made you realize the need for something like this?
No, I mean the what actually, to be honest, what the kernel that kind of got Slam rolling was I had originally thought, because artists are not really getting paid at all anymore in the ways that they used to be, where it's much harder to even make a middle class lifestyle, through music. It's hard to support yourself at all through music. In fact, only 11% of people who call themselves professional musicians can pay the rent can sustain themselves just through the music. So the original thought was to find a way to do financial compensation, but that was, like I said, that was day one. It was before there was even an LLC or before we truly launched. So kind of went from there and just kind of it evolved to the point where I recognized that the greater need is the mental health need. The greater need is to prevent, all the tragedies that are, or to do what we can to prevent the tragedies that are, again, it's part of the culture. It's an accepted part of the culture and even applauded. It's even there's some mythology and romanticism about it, which, we want to change perceptions and maybe again get more information out there and also provide a little bit of hope to musicians. So that's kind of how we came to that. So no, that was a long answer to your short question was no, there wasn't like this event like, oh my gosh, when we lost so and so, that I realized I had to step up. Like no, it's more just recognizing it in the need of a lifetime of seeing musicians suffer and losing so many.
So, in a sense, Jack, you've sort of described Slam's mission, because this is kind of the first I'm hearing about it. But in helping, let's say, musicians and people in that community, what kinds of support and resources does your organization offer?
Well, I'll give you the pitch. I'll give you the spiel. So, what people sometimes mistake for slams, we actually don't have a bunch of counselors on staff. I think some people have said, I'm going through a spot, I got to reach out to Slam for help. And actually, there are some great organizations out there that do have counselors on hand that are ready to help.
Hmm.
So, Slam actually, this is through our website. There's all kinds of resources. If you're in trouble, Slam is a good place to go. But go and hit the website, and you will find what you need through links. And of course, you can reach out to me, and I will help you and any of our advisory council or board will help you to kind of get to the resources you need. But what Slam does, our real missions, we're doing these data reports. We started actually in September of 2025, and then October 2025 is so those two have been released so far. About and these are provide. This is not very exciting stuff. This isn't the kind of thing like if I was hanging out at a party with Tommy Lee, I wouldn't say, Tommy Lee, let me tell you about my data reports. But we put out reports with information that will be of use to record labels. And I mean, really anyone in the scene can learn from these things, learn from these reports. But our main kind of our flagship is we do release a weekly, people call it a podcast. We release it on YouTube and we release an audio version on the podcast. It's all of your podcatchers can get it, where we talk to musicians and music industry VIPs and journalists and media people, just saying.
Hmm.
But we talk to people and we kind of get the real stories about the life. We'll talk about careers and that kind of thing, but mainly it's to talk about the things that aren't really talked about often. And we've had some great guests on, and a lot of guests have said it's really great to be able to talk about this because in most interviews this is kind of verboten. We don't really talk about this kind of thing. So we kind of we get into it. And I will say though, if you're thinking, gosh, that sounds like the most depressing show ever, like no, we really keep it light, and that's intentional because we don't the music scene for so many people is kind of a party. No one wants to go to the party and be like, hey, I'm here at the party. You know about the world suicide numbers, or do you hear about the war across? Like no one wants to be that person, and like you're gonna so we try to keep the conversation light. We try to keep it fun. We will go there and we'll get serious and we'll get deep, but it's mainly that's mainly kind of what the flagship is. We call them the tagline is it's a music survival guide. Originally called them Slam Summits, so it's the Slam Music Survival Guides is the podcast episodes, and that's kind of what we can talk more about it, I guess, but that's kind of what our services are. Those three things.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, Jack, because I think you said it right, right? Mental health, addiction, recovery, these are common everywhere, not just in the music world. They're in every part of everybody's life, our families, our jobs, the people around us, Hollywood, politicians, everything. But especially in rock and metal, you don't talk about it, right? These are taboo topics. It's more like, in a sense, and let's be honest here. Like you hear that so and so is heading to rehab, you're just like, oh, he's drunk. Oh, they're just a druggie. They can't get out of their own way. How many years is it going to be before that guy gets his shit together, right? And then we love to read the books that say, oh yeah, man, that guy's just sex, drugs, and rock and roll 24/7 for the last 50 years. But the reality of it is, I use that word taboo again. It's got to be difficult for artists to come forward and say, hey, I need help in whatever that is. So maybe talk a little bit about some of the notable guests and collaborators that you've had with Slam. Like, who are some of the industry figures that have gotten involved?
Sure. Yeah, no, I know. Well, our earliest biggest guest was David Ellefson. We had him and
Hmm.
Burton C. Bell from Fear Factory, of course.
Yep.
And the topic, of course, was in that for that episode. It was just the two of them and myself was the panel. The topic was toxic band relationships, and I
Hmm.
will just say, while I encourage everyone to listen, there's not a lot of dirt, but they're both very professional and
Hmm.
very respectful of their former bandmates. They didn't come on and talk shit. But they both of them had great perspectives. Both of them were really fantastic and really supportive of what we're doing. But we've had I mean, I'm really proud of the roster of people we've had on. So apologies to past guests if I don't name you in this list, but Neil Giraldo, of course, is probably our most famous, who's Pat Benatar's husband, who's a just iconic, a guitar player who influenced me. We just talked to Doro Pesh, who is again
Hmm.
it's someone whose poster I had on my wall, the Warlock tour flyer on my wall. So, Doro Pesh, we talked to Jason McMaster, we talked to some industry legends. We talked to Heidi Robinson Fitzgerald, who has worked with everyone from
Hmm.
Barry Manilow to Perry Farrell to Slayer. She and Anthrax, she's incredible. Amy Sciarretto, also Muncie Ricci, John
Hmm.
Freeman, so a lot of great people from that world. But again, just a lot of as I said, a lot of incredible musicians who've been on who've had Mark Lopes is one of my favorite interviews, and he was one of our earliest ones. Mark Lopes, of Metal Church,
Metal Church, sure.
yeah, he just and he had such great stories. Again, I could name Jarvis Leatherby of Night Demon is one of my favorite new wave of traditional
Mm.
metal bands. Just so many great stories, and again, great insights and really just wonderful insights and personal stories. And I've learned so much in these conversations just myself. But it's been wonderful, and yeah, a lot of people. I've gotten such great feedback. People really. As I said at the get from the get-go, some people are just like, yeah, musicians, whatever. They're all rich. So what do I? It's their fault. They all snorted all that money away. What do I care? But then, when and actually I talked a lot about this at NAMM in 2025, in January of 2025. I was at the NAMM conference, and like I said, a lot of people in the industry just get it, and they say, "My God, this is so needed. Thank you so much for doing this." And I've gotten some great people. Another person, Pamela Parks, who is David Ellison's current. She's a manager for a lot of great people,
Mhm.
especially in metal. She's just been wonderful. So those are some of the names. Again, apologies if you're watching and you were on and I didn't name you because I appreciate every one of you. And like I said, they've all been great.
I listened to the David Ellison Burton C. Bell episode, and that was excellent, and it was interesting. Number one, but it was very revealing, and it was honest, and it was raw, and it was. But what I liked about it is again, and Jack, like John and I are talking to guests. It's typically the shiny side of life, right? It's okay, you got an album, a tour coming up. We're going to talk and promote and build a hype of your product, and everything is lovely at that moment in time. But then hear from these guys, and they say, you know what? But did you guys ever think about what it's like to be out on the road with a band for 6 months on a tour bus, crammed in space? You know, people you've been with for 40 years that naturally you wear down on each other. There's going to be ups and downs with the successes of the bands, money issues. People don't think philosophically the same way. Then there's your physical and mental health. Um, to me, it was an eye opener. And I appreciated that episode because it wasn't like there was no slander, there was no attacking anybody. It was just here's kind of what happens on a day to day life of what we go through, guys. Aside from that 2 hours on stage, I think like being a corporate guy in a sense, like, we look at it as like, oh God, that rock and roll life is so glorious and that kind of stuff. But the reality of it is how many of these musicians don't have health benefits? They can't take care of their teeth or their whatever it is. They don't have dental health or whatever it is because they can't afford it, right? So I think there's a lot more that goes into it than just partying and addiction and alcoholism and drug abuse, correct?
Yeah, you said it perfectly. In fact, while I want you to take over the show because you have such a good understanding of it. I'm going to step aside and no, no, I mean, let me say it seriously. Because Rich Catino, who's my New
Hmm.
Jersey brother, not literally, not, but he's a great guy. He and I have done,
We know
well,
Rich.
yeah,
Yeah.
he and I have done something similar to what you guys do. By the way, you guys, I love your show. You guys do an incredible job.
Oh,
You
thank
really
you.
get great conversation with people. But he and I do something similar where we talk to people, and this is vital. By the way, let me just say that what you guys do is vital. What Rich and I did, I'm so proud of what we did. It's vital for people to kind of hear about the records and the life and that kind of thing is absolutely vital. But Slam is vital in a different way. It's vital in a different. But again, I appreciate what you saying that. People don't recognize how many. I mean, it actually was interesting that Chappell Roan, who's kind of a huge pop star right now, at a recent Grammys, basically got up on stage, said thank you for this, and then called out the industry and said, we don't have any mental health benefits, we don't have any health benefits. You guys got to step up and start doing this right. And I thought that was such and a lot of people went, oh wow, I never thought about that. And I thought that was so true. And again, you nailed it. A lot of these people, I mean, it's like I think I was shocked a few years ago to learn that Chuck Billy of Testament like works in a warehouse. Like a lot of these
Mm.
guys have day jobs aside from being, mega famous rock stars. So the lifestyle is not as cushy. And then the job itself is really hard. You're away from there's so much insecurity and instability not to mention then if you're a person who's fighting with some addictions, I mean, you're being subjected to it. It's really hard to lock that out, especially if you're on the road where people just have this perception of this is the lifestyle. You're here, get out the alcohol, get out the drugs, like this is it. And, for someone who's trying to recover, like a James Hetfield who's out of rehab and saying, I can't be around that, like it's a real struggle.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And I mean, this rock and metal community that we love so much, take it back 30, 40 years, but it was always quote unquote, oh, just tough it out. Like it's a tough it out mentality, right? Maybe how do you instruct some of the people, or maybe through your philosophy, how do you navigate breaking down that stigma when we're talking about support and wellness?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that's the kind of thing you just have to slowly erode that because yeah, as I said, there's a lot of that attitude of just tough it out, or only the strong survive. I mean that that's kind of you hear that kind of thing a lot, not just from Manowar. And I'm not picking on Manowar, but you hear that kind of thing a lot. But it's just you just have to erode. You just have to kind of make people realize that even people, like James Hetfield again. I'm not picking out.
Mhm.
He's one of my idols, but people like, what do I care about James Hetfield? But I look at James Hetfield. I think he pretty famously in the last 2 years talked on stage about he just kind of had a moment where he said, I don't feel like I belong here. Like I feel like
Yeah.
and the band all came over and hugged him, and it's like wow, that's a real moment where he kind of let the real how he really felt kind of shine through. And I think again, there's a lot of callousness, I think, about it because he's so rich. People are like, Psh, I wish I had his problems. He's, he can just buy whatever he needs. He can buy his happiness, but like clearly not. I mean, again, the list of, it's an awful list, but it's an awful
Yeah.
list of people to go through who apparently have everything, who still leave, who still check out early, or who like Phil from Thin Lizzy,
Mhm.
top of the world, one of the greatest talents ever, great looking guy, like greatest, one of the best bands of all time, couldn't stop, couldn't get control of his demons, and then so I think people need to recognize these are human beings, and any one of us could be in that space. This wasn't because Phil or James or Chris Cornell, they were not weak people. It's just they're human.
No, I know. I mean, society sensationalizes the good and the bad of things, right? I mean, the first thing you heard when Chris Cornell passed away was, oh, he played in Detroit, and an hour and a half later, he was hung in his hotel by his belt. Chester Bennington, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And that's what draws people to watch the tabloid shows on TV because that's what people want to hear. They want to hear the gossip, right? But I always say, you know, I take it, even in my personal life, there's no such thing as a perfect family. There's ups and downs. There's people in my life that have had addictions, mental health issues. I've lost people to addiction. I get it. I'm a proponent of therapy. I go to therapy every 2 weeks for my good, for my well being, and I don't have an addiction, but I go to therapy because I think it's important to have mental health and mental clarity,
Yeah.
but Jack, you bring up like somebody like James Hetfield, right? And I think we talk about a band like Metallica, they're such a structured machine in 2025. John and I were, privileged to have to go see them the last couple of years on the 72 seasons. Um, and you look and it's literally like a machine as it is. But James is up there. He's serious, but you could tell he's focused, he's passionate, but he's not the wild and crazy guy he was on the Black Tour in 1992, chugging beers and dumping them over his head. He needs that structure, that stability, right?
Right.
He probably needs that 2 hours on stage, but it's everything else from the after show to the before show to the massages to the exercise to the sleep to the diet that ties back into this. And not everybody, let's say, is as fortunate as him where he has all the resources at his hand to do it.
Right, right. Almost no one. I mean, almost no one is in a band that's also a corporation. I mean and you're right. He has people. I would love to have someone come to my house every day and say, get out of bed. You're having the smoothie made of celery and other terrible things. You're having this disgusting drink because it's good for you. I would that would be incredible. Yeah, but you're that's also true. And one other quick anecdote I wanted to bring up, which is along these lines. Well, I mean, there were two things from the past that I remember that really were inspirational for Slam. One of them, of course, is the Some Kind of Monster documentary, which really blew the lid off of the personalities of inside Metallica and the
Mhm.
struggles for all four of them. I mean, less so for Robert, but the real struggles. But another anecdote, I remember a young-ish Dave Grohl saying that he'd be, because the pre like he's at that level. He's at the James Hetfield level now. But
Mhm.
in the early days of Foo Fighters, he said he'd be in a store maybe, and some kid would be like, "Oh, I can't believe that asshole killed himself." And he'd be like, I had to just, it took everything I had to restrain myself from strangling this kid. It's like that's one of my best friends you're talking about,
Mhm.
who, meaning Kurt Cobain, of course, if you're if
Sure.
you're not sure who we're talking about. But in David Grohl famously was in Nirvana, one of the biggest bands in history. Kurt Cobain, ended his life through suicide. And again, the callousness that someone would feel like they could say to Dave Grohl, like, that asshole killed himself. And they're talking to this guy about one of his best friends and, colleagues, who he lost, who he was broken about losing. So again, that these are all the things we need people to really understand, is that Kurt Cobain is a human being. Dave Grohl, as much as a corporate machine is all around him, and even he's a part of it. He's like the CEO, basically. He's still a human being. James Hetfield is a human being. So, like, let's remember that. Sure, I would love to have their money. I would love to. I would love to have that. But I also respect the fact that they're allowed to have feelings. They're allowed to feel depressed and even despair. So many lyrics in the last two Metallica albums have been about suicide. Like I'm like,
Mhm.
so James, again, I know we're singling out James, but it's because he's a human being. Keep repeating
Yeah.
that refrain.
Well, I mean, Jack, too, you think of, I mean, artists coming to my mind, a few others. Like I think about Glenn Hughes, who I just recently interviewed. I mean, Glenn wrote a magnificent book, but he went to hell and back. I mean, there's pockets of his life that he doesn't even remember. The infamous 1986 Seven Stars, Tony Iommi Black Sabbath album where he was punched in the face by a roadie and couldn't finish the tour, did 6 shows. But one of my questions to him was, I said, hey, Glenn, all your material that you write about seems to be very much about the human condition, your spirituality, your God, your higher power. And he said, you know what, Walt? He says, I don't get through my day if I don't focus on my higher power. He goes, and my higher power doesn't necessarily need to be my God. It's what guides me to stay focused and to care about myself, which is what keeps me sober and in a well place.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, his story, I mean, all around the Black Sabbath camp are stories like this we're lucky that any of them are with us today.
Yeah.
It's a cruel it's a sad fact that Ronnie James Dio was a little bit more of a healthy lifestyle than the other guys, and we lost him, younger than
Yeah.
most of them. But yeah, I mean, right. That's a great example. I mean, there's just so much excess and so many risks and so many, like the way we lost Randy Rhoads is heartbreaking. It was not his fault. He was not at fault, but it was due to drunkenness and recklessness. People around him. So it's just, apparently the pilot of the plane that just was apparently not in his right mind and
Yeah.
crashed the plane. And so there's just too many damn stories about this kind of thing. So I think I lost my point, but I'm agreeing. I'm still agreeing with what you were saying. But
Yeah.
this is something, like I think we need to raise awareness so that I mean, our current generation and the older gen, and especially younger generations coming up, we can kind of break that cycle of you get into rock and roll to live a party lifestyle, to live basically the Peter Pan lifestyle where you don't really have to grow up and you're free of consequences and free of responsibility. It's like, well, no, like, there's still always going to be consequences for what you do. And that has been said by some slam guests. I've just reading through the transcripts just last night. One of our guests was talking about how they basically, were just got older, or got like into their 30s, and we're like, I'm blacking out every night, and I wake up, I don't know where I am, and I just, my body's starting to feel this. Like there's real consequences for my behaviors.
And you would think again, like the average fan might look at, let's say, back to the wild and crazy 80s scene, right? And that was what was portrayed in the MTV videos on Headbangers Ball. But the
Yeah.
reality of it is, I can't imagine the average rock and roll musician that's on a tour bus 5 days a week and away from home for 6 months at a time is getting fucked up because he's happy about it and he's loving life and it's just girls naked all around him. I find that hard to believe. I think it's quite the other way around. What kind of feedback have you or stories have you heard from some of these guys? You don't need to name names, but like what drives these musicians to these dark places?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people talk about they kind of draw the parallel. They say people who have these creative compulsions are kind of and create, like this applies to actors and writers. And actually, I'll just throw not any numbers at you, but the statistics are showing that, that the accidental death, which includes suicides and drunk DUI accidents, that kind of thing, that it's higher among musicians than really in any other occupation. Like
Hmm.
it's just it's out of control. But a lot of people are just drawing those parallels of saying, these creative people, a lot of it's there's a lot of people who do or get into creativity as an escape from kind of tragedies in their lives or things that are hard for them to deal with, and so then they're naturally drawn to these other vices. I will say Stephen Rosen, great journalist,
Hmm.
who was best friends with Eddie Van Halen for a while. I
Hmm.
think you guys have spoken with him.
Yeah, we did. Hmm.
He talked about how Eddie Van Halen used to say, "I cannot go on stage if I'm not drunk. Like I just can't do it." And I again their friendship did break up eventually. So I mean, hopefully Eddie did get to a point where he didn't feel that way. But for most of his professional life, Eddie Van Halen, greatest guitar player of all time, and most people's eyes, a great innovator, and one of the greats, whatever you like think of him as one of the true innovators, still had insecurities and couldn't deal with it. And again, there's a guy who was surrounded by women throwing themselves at him and had every vice available to him. And he I'll also say again, this is not from a Slam Summit, but if you ever read the Heroin Diaries from Nikki Sixx, and this is a guy who said yes to every single negative thing that or fun thing that turned into something harmful and damaging that came at him. And then the other thing I want to point out about that book is, I mean, I have read that book and I was a huge Motley Crue fan, but I'm like, by the end of the book, I'm like, man, I hate you. What a terrible person. And he presented it that way. I'm not picking on you, Nikki Sixx, but I'm just saying, like, he presented it this way. Like, this is an honest account of how damaging this kind of stuff can be. And I just think of the people that he hurt along the way, just
Sure.
carelessly wounded because he was just so lost in that spot, in that place.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, Jack. An artist that might, you think would hurt somebody, or um, you know, that that just continues this and that kind of thing. It makes me think of like an artist like Rob Halford, right, from Judas Priest. I mean, and I'll share a personal story with you. I went to see Judas Priest up in Connecticut only a couple of weeks ago, and I ended up in the food catering area around 5 o'clock. And I had a couple exchanges with a few of the members of Priest. But I will tell you, and maybe it's because Rob Halford is sober. Maybe it's because Alice Cooper is sober. Maybe it's because Nita Strauss is sober. But that food area it was like going to a diner. It was all this excellent food, sodas, soft drinks, coffee, tea, yogurts, ice cream. There was not one person was drinking, not one. Now, yes, out by the tour buses, a couple guys had some beers, but nothing crazy. But I think just it shows the testament to the good sides of these examples for these legends that made it out on the right side. I mean, Alice's addiction is golf. There's no secret there, but he's been sober for a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
what a shame for a guy like Rob Halford that battled those demons mainly because of his sexuality, and it took him all those decades to be able to comfortable and come out number one, but then write a book about it. But now, you know what? He's up there. He could care less. He's Rob Halford. He's the metal god, but he's Rob Halford, the gay man, and nobody cares.
Right. Yeah, his book, I have not yet read his second book, but Ron Halford's book was really beautiful. It's a beautiful story, and yeah, you really feel for him. I've so many terrible stories or just heart-wrenching stories of him having to kind of sneak and hide and go to, trying to, like, the rest of the band are trying to hook up with groupies right there, and he's having to kind of go and hide and like go to like truck stops and stuff. I mean, you really feel for this guy, the way that he suffered through these moments. And but I do want to say also, it is great that they're able to do that. But I mean, again, going back to something we said earlier, most bands don't have that kind of a control. Where
Yeah.
and Alice and Rob can basically dictate this is going to be a sober environment, and that's the end of it. And
Hmm.
no, but most other professional touring musicians or struggling touring musicians don't have that kind of power. So if there's someone's like, I'm really trying to kick this dangerous habit, that's right. Like they can't say this is going to be a sober area. They just have to stand there and watch people indulging and just fight against their own compulsion to join in. So that's a hard thing to do. It takes a lot more. People do underestimate how hard it is. Like, just say no, just abstain.
Hmm.
You don't have to do it. You can just walk away. Like, okay. Like, how many
Yeah.
times you've been in the break room and you're like, I shouldn't have that donut, but I'm going to have it. Like, well, imagine if it's a chemical thing that has got worked its way into your brain. So, I mean, again, need to have some appreciation for the Robs and the Alice Coopers and the Nita Strauss, the people who have made it, like you said, who've survived it and
Hmm.
become powerhouses. James Hetfield, people who are powerhouses, but also the people who are in the trenches who are just either in the middle of it or on the other end of it and really trying to do their best.
Jack, you've done a lot of studying and research on these subjects, and you made a point before about Eddie Van Halen. It's been 5 years since he passed. Um, and it's amazing when you think about it, but like you said, how could Eddie Van Halen get nervous up on stage where knowing he's done thousands of shows, he's the biggest guitar player in the universe, but maybe then again, that's just it. Maybe he was a perfectionist. Maybe he created such a difficult world for himself that he couldn't go up on stage for those 2 hours every night without freaking himself out because of the spotlight was on him. Like, what's your perspective on these musicians? Like, why do you think they go there? Is it the pressure of success? Is it the guys that drink themselves to sleep every night because boy, they're walking out with $100 and they can't send the checks home to their wife and kids and they're broke?
Yeah, well, that's a funny thing. And actually, we had a great musician out of Pennsylvania named George Robb who talked about a lot about this. And I've actually heard, and I've spoken with Devin Townsend about this, not for Slam, but just as a media, as a journalist. Name drop, Devin Townsend. But so the perception is the perception. Sorry, is a serious thing. So the perception is, musicians have a skewed view of what success really means, and just because, again, a lot of it has to do with the legends of the guys from the 70s who had five mansions and mountains of cocaine and their own private jets. And, there's become this perception of that's it. That's anything less than that is failure. So I think musicians need to kind of wrap their heads around it's okay to have a middle class lifestyle as a musician. If you're getting paid and you don't need to work another job, or if you are basically or you're doing well, then that is a successful thing. I think it's a tremendous amount of pressure. Um, but I mean, and I don't know if I took your question in the wrong direction, but it's as far as the Eddie Van Halen, where that wasn't the case. I think that is a thing. You see that in the writing world as well, where these writers, George R. R. Martin, the Game of Thrones, they put so much pressure on themselves. The next thing they do has got to be absolutely perfect. It cannot
Mm-hmm.
be. And I think Dave Mustaine did that for a while, and I think we saw a lot of that. In the metal world, we saw it from Dave Mustaine. We see a lot of these guys that put so much pressure on themselves, and it eventually becomes impossible. Becomes impossible the environment just won't bear it. Where you cannot really, instead of just being the best musician you can be and putting out the best stuff you can, and enjoying the ride with yourself and your fans and your community. A lot of musicians just can't handle it. And then also, let's face it, every long musical career has its potholes on the way. A lot of whether you like it or not, a lot of people view the No Prayer for the Dying record as a pothole in Iron Maiden's illustrious, incredible career.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that they suck, that they're failures, or even that album is a failure. Some people like it, but it's you have to be able to kind of process that, and it's hard for all of us. I mean, again, at the day job, you're at the office and submit a report that has a bunch of holes in it, or it doesn't really work out well, or whatever the case may be. We think we all have a hard time with that. But I guess you got to also think, as someone at Eddie Van Halen's stature, he's basically being told by everyone around him, "You are a god. You can do no wrong. You are flawless. You're perfect." And then, then if takes a bath in the press over something, some kind of bad behavior, or an album that isn't received as well, then that's hard. That's harder to process. And if you give me one more minute, I'll say another thing about this. Is a
Yeah,
lot
of
of these
course.
guys, imagine remember what an idiot you were as a teenager. I certainly remember what an idiot I was as a
Of
teenager.
course.
Imagine like hitting the pinnacle of success at that age when you were that dumb and not really needing to grow up because basically everything you do, you've got this entourage around you who are applauding everything you do. Like,
Mhm.
that time you drank too much and threw up all over yourself, man, that was brilliant. So you don't, a lot of these guys aren't that they don't really have a lot of the stuff that they don't have they're not as well equipped to kind of deal with these things because they never really had to kind of grow up and mature. Again, it's the Peter Pan kind of
Right.
lifestyle. So these things are essential. I mean, not everyone. I don't want to paint this like every musician with this brush, but I mean, a lot of these musicians never had to grow up, so they never did, and so they don't have the tools that they need to kind of cope with these kind of struggles, like perfectionism or failure or criticism or
Yeah. No,
relationships.
yeah, very, very true. Very true. Well, Jack, you illustrate a lot of great points here. I want to take it back to Slam because we're kind of talking about everything that could relate around Slam, but back to Slam. I mean, you've been doing this for a little over a year or so now. What are some of the good moments, some of the highlights, a success story that you can look and say, this is why we're doing this because this happened? What were some of the success stories?
Yeah, I wish you hadn't given me that opening. I could talk for an hour because it's been 2025 is really Slam's first year. We launched in
Okay.
January 2025. So yeah, it's been the very one of the very first conversations we ever had was with Mark Lopes, and again, hearing him really tell these incredibly beautiful, passionate, personal stories, and again, me as a longtime interviewer, kind of going like, we've never gone here before. And it wouldn't, again, as I said, that wouldn't be appropriate for Metal Asylum. It wouldn't have been like the right place for us to go. So just listening to these stories and saying, this is really right. This is going to make a difference. This is really needed. And just really, that was a great feeling early on. It was validation really early on, like
Hmm.
saying like this is a good thing that we're doing. So that's the thing where I've recognized. Now, of course, we're shooting for the moon for Slam, but if my personal financial responsibilities require me to kind of do less with Slam, I still know that it's a vital thing, and I still will keep going. That was an early one. The great feedback that we got on that David Ellison and Burton C. Bell episode, and the
Hmm.
press coverage was through the roof, and just the great responses we got. That and I appreciate your kind words about that episode. But again, the way that conversation went, um, like I said, I would love to have those two guys on Metal Asylum or see them on the Metal Voice or Metal Mayhem, but
Yeah.
like it would go differently. Like those two guys are
Yeah.
great together. I'd love to see that conversation, but again, it would be a different kind of thing, like having them on and just feeling like we're reaching people. Those things have been great. And I'll also say, obviously, I won't name any names, but getting messages from people saying like this really helped, and I lost someone in my family to suicide, and watching this episode really helped a lot. And some of my
Hmm.
guests have said, that people reached out to them and said, I watched your episode of Slam and it really helped so much because I'm really struggling right now. And, that has been wonderful. I've gotten emails from people, who are heroes of mine saying, like, I really support what you do, and like count me in to help. Like, this is really needed. And that kind of makes me, those are the, so I can't say my success story is, oh, we got $1 million check from a corporation. I'm looking forward to that success story too. But in all seriousness, the encouragement and the support and the respect that we've gotten and the just how many people are truly endorse what we do. That has been great. Like I said, that makes me realize that no matter what, I'm going to keep Slam going, and just going to continue to do the things that we're trying to do and make a difference in the world and literally save some lives. I mean, like that's what it's all about.
Sure, sure. So, Jack, for the listeners that want to get involved, where do they go? Is it donating? Is it just getting involved? What can we do or our listeners do to help spread the word? What's the best way to help support Slam's mission?
Well, no, thanks. Yeah, I'd say certainly subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on the socials. There's Facebook and LinkedIn are the main ones we do. There is an Instagram presence, and I there is a Blue Sky presence, but that doesn't get it. But so anyway, sorry. So yeah, subscribe through YouTube, follow us on social media. Yeah, and as I said, we do any nonprofit does need money to be fully effective. We're trying to get these data reports, that I'm putting in like 40 hours a day, putting in these in. And I have a great, which I have not touched on yet. I have a great an advisory council of musicians, professionals, podcasters, a legal team, like a great number of people. But these kinds of things, like there's just a lot of time and resources that are required for us to really be effective. So yes, donations, we have a Give Butter is the method we use, and it's about, you can find the Give Butter link at the supportlifeandmusic.org website. So yeah, if you can contribute financially, like I said, that enables us to do more powerful reports, and it enables us to do more powerful outreach, do more powerful surveys, and increase the quality of our interviews. So that we can have better production values and maybe have further outreach to get stars, like someone I could never dream of getting someone on the level of Kirk Hammett, but something like that. You know, I say that because, anyway, but yeah, like but seriously, like, so yeah, your contributions, like you can do recurring gifts or just talk to me about it. You can also reach out to me. The email, my Slam email is jack@supportlifeandmusic.org. You can certainly reach out. We also Yes, volunteering is helpful. Spreading the word is helpful. All these things are really helpful, and just those are some of the initial ways I would say definitely that people can contribute and help and make the world a better place so that musicians don't aren't in such a dire place, and aren't and musicians have more tools and resources at their disposal to help them to kind of survive and get through and withstand, all the pressures and difficulties of the life.
Well, Jack, your summit is fascinating. It's amazing, and it really comes from a good place and from the heart. We thank you for doing this. It's unique. So before I let you go, what's next for Slam? What's on the agenda go forward?
Well, we did solidify, as any, I mean, I know, you've got some startups in your background, like, as anyone knows with startups, in the early days, you're kind of like, this is what we're doing. No, 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 wait. This is what we're doing. No, hang on. So we're finally over that hump. We have our three missions, which I kind of outlined in the early days, is the report, the data, the research, the Slam Summit podcasts, and providing resources so that you go to the website and you can find what you need. Those are the three things. We're going to expand on those. We're going to continue doing the Slam Summits. That's going to go out weekly. We're going to continue having great guests on, and doing, we want to do more conferences and more in-person kinds of things too. So keep an eye out for that, and keep an eye out on the social medias. But yeah, like I said, kind of just growing what we're doing now and continuing to having great conversations and that kind of thing. We had talked. The plan is, I'm not sure, when this is going to go out. We also want to do recognition. We want to recognize people who are doing good in the world. Yeah, and
Mhm.
I don't mean that I mean doing well, sure, but doing good. We're doing good deeds and helping the community and helping to raise awareness in this space.
Yeah. Well, this is a good thing. So, for our listeners, guys, help Jack out, support his cause. This is all for the better of all of us. We're all fans of rock and metal music. We're just coming at it from a different angle, right? And this is a good thing. So make sure you head over to his website and his YouTube videos and give him that support. So, Jack, it's been a great discussion with you, and I wish you continued success. And we'll be riding your coattails right behind you here. So best of luck with everything.
Oh, thanks so much. No, I mean, I'm Slam is, and I'm writing Metal Mayhem ROC's coattails. What are you talking about? But no, you guys do a great show. It's an honor to be on. So my best to John and you and your whole crew. Thank you so much for having me on and talk and helping me to talk about, spread the word about Slam. And yeah, all the best to you guys. Keep doing what you're doing. You guys are absolutely ruling this space. So great stuff. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for the compliments. We're all in this together. Remember that. So today, for my guest, Jack Mangan of Slam, I'm Metal Walt, and this is Metal Mayhem ROC.
Thanks for watching Metal Mayhem ROC. Subscribe and check out another interview right here.